coffee to start the day, and I'm probably going to need it today. Today, the project I got is we'll be doing replacing the hearth for our wood stove, which is probably going to be a pretty good project because I have to rip everything out and then go all back with new. So it's going to be a project, but we'll get it done. Okay, start on this project. First step we got to do is take all this stuff right here and get it out of the way. Alright, so now that this stuff is out of the way, next step we'll get on to is disassembling the stovepipe and cleaning the stove out and getting things out of it to make it lighter so that it'll be easier to move out of the way. And there, we have a stove out of the way. Now on to the next step. We've got the stove cleaned up, got it out of the way. Realized we have some work to do to the stove now with some of the seals being damaged. But now on to the step of tearing everything out. As always, when you're chipping grout and tile, wear your safety glasses. Don't want to get any chips in your eye. Good possibility. And wear gloves and hand protection, because once you start breaking this stuff up, if it does chip, it will have sharp edges. Last thing you want to do is end up with a lacerated hand. Sometimes it's necessary to pop the grout out, but as loose as this is, we probably don't need to. And it will probably crack and shatter as it comes out. It doesn't appear as though this was put down really well. Had too much flex in it. Not sure how they put it down. A good possibility it might not be on hardy board, which is concrete board that's normally used to put grout on. The way this is flexing, there's a good possibility it could be on plywood or OSB. This would explain the already cracked and broken tiles. That went relatively quick. Wasn't really attached too well. Now we get to find out what it was actually attached to. Is it plywood, OSB, or concrete board? Now we just got to try to figure out how to get the concrete board or whatever it is up. And it appears to be concrete board. Okay, so we got that mess cleaned up with getting all the concrete board up and everything. Stuff makes a mess, but just kind of brittle and everything. Let's got that cleaned up, and now we have the new concrete board that we're going to be putting down, cut to fit, and we'll be putting that down. I've already kind of did the layout as far as what exact size I'm going to do the hearth. Where it best fits the tile that I'm using, so I can minimize the cuts that I have to do to my tile to make it fit for the size of hearth we're going to do. Pulled up the manufacturer specs and fire codes to make sure that I still have the proper side clearances and front clearances and back clearances for the manufacturer stove. Just because you got to have proper clearances on all sides for meet fire code regulations. So I made sure we have all that with the size of hearth we're doing. So Now I'm going to start laying the concrete board down and anchoring it. And that has a concrete board attached. Okay, so last night we got the concrete board finished up, and then moving on to the next item that we did was for the angle trim to put around the edge of the hardy board that the tile will actually go into. This gives it a nice finished look to where that you have the metal at the edge of the, as you can see right here, you have the metal at the edge of it, and your tile just kind of sets up right nice to it, and that way it ends up, if you do step up on it, you're not stepping on the actual edge of the tile, you kind of stepping on the metal. That way it kind of helps with keep the tile in place, and it doesn't allow for it to break up. As what I did was, as you can see, I cut that at a 45 so that way then you could just bend it around the edges, and that way you don't end up with a sharp corner. It's a little bit nicer finish that way. If you do step up on it and stuff, you don't have a sharp edge there. And now for the part of this project is what I'm on to is I am kind of laying out my bricks. These are actually clay tiles that are made to look like antique brick, and so they're different colors and variations, and being as OCD as I am, I can't have two of the same bricks the same place, or they have to be equally spaced. So now is what I'm doing is completely laying out the bricks to make the color patterns that I like and figure out which ones will need to be cut to fill everything in. So for this portion of the project, we will be laying all the bricks out and marking which ones get cut and where the cuts get made. So then it will be a quick job for laying them down. Now I have certain bricks that, or clay tiles, that I will need to be cutting. The ones across the front I'm cutting at 3.5 inches off each end of the brick, and the ones down the side I will be just cutting those in half to finish out that template, because with the way we laid it out, we're going to have minimum cuts. I got the ones across the front that I had to cut, and the ones like every other one down the side had to be cut at 4.5, and that will be all the cuts we will have. Everything else will be laid out. So we'll start marking these. These are the ones that we will be cutting at 3.5. So we'll get all these marked. I need different gloves. Those gloves are stiff. Can't feel my fingers into cutting them off.
Not good.
Wouldn't be good at all. These are not stiff. I can feel my digits. Okay, we have all our pieces marked, and we're going to start cutting them. First step will be to adjust our tile saw so that we are cutting the correct size. That's what I'm doing, is lining up my marks with the blade on the saw so that we will get our 3.5 inch cut like I want. And once I get it marked, then I can slide the slide stop in, lock that down, and everything will be cut equally, no matter which side we go to. Yes. So I'm using as a wet saw. It's easier, you can do this without a wet saw, but the wet saw kind of helps with chipping. It's going to be loud.
Okay.
Wet saw is a diamond grit blade, and it keeps the water on it, which keeps the blade cool for cutting stones and clay tiles. Otherwise your blade will get hot, and when your blade gets hot, that's when it starts deteriorating and loses its sharpness. But the diamond grit is the best way to go. We was able to get all the pieces cut. As you can see, we have the pattern completely laid out with the colorations that I want and sizing and everything. And now the next step will be to start pulling these tiles out in a way that I'll stack them so that I'll know exactly where they go back to, and we'll start applying the thin set and actually adhering the bricks to the concrete board. Okay, now that we have the bricks out of the way, we'll start applying the thin set. And you want to do it in kind of smaller patches. You don't want to just put it all on at once, because you don't want it to start curing and setting up before you actually get the tiles positioned where they need to be. So you want to do it in smaller sections. Usually in a section like this, I'll end up probably doing like half the width. You just kind of gauge it with, depending on how quick it sets up and stuff, on how much you actually can do at one time. And big thing is you want to make sure you get it a good set, kind of up in your corners and your edges. That's where it's kind of hardest to get it. And you want to kind of get it to where it's grooved and it's not just solid. This is the reason using the finger trowels. Something like this, probably a 1/4 to 3/8 deep is what you want on that size brick and tile. This is a 1/2 inch tile, and I'm just kind of sloping it so that way I'll get my good adhesion. You want to try to get it kind of where it's pretty even in how you're doing it, so that you can level your bricks and stuff out better. Tiles, I mean. And as you're setting the tile, you want to kind of move it around and set it where you want it. That way it kind of will help level it out a little bit. And the size I was going for in my grout lines on this was about 3/8 inch gap is what I have. The trick with this tile here is the fact that these are made to look like antique brick, and so they're not cut square or true. They're kind of different shapes a little bit. So as far as getting the grout lines exact, I've learned with this, because I put this down before, is you can't get it exact. You have to kind of go by look and a lot of your spacing. Now if you're dealing with true 12 inch by 12 inch tile, or 18 by 18 tile, or that is truly square and more uniform, you can get your grout lines exact. But sometimes when you're pushing it down, you'll get the glue that'll come up too high. You want to make sure that you smooth that down some, because you don't want your glue to stick up in your grout line too much. And then you won't be able to get your grout in like you need to. One thing I forgot, it's nice to have a damp rag. To keep your glue from coming up too far. You can actually wipe it down with that. And I can see that my 3/8 is going to be too much for what I had planned on, especially in that front, because of the way I went across the front. And the rest of them, ideally you just want to kind of lay them in place as you're starting, and not really stick them down. And the main reason on that with these is because these are so inconsistent. Because there is about, with this tile here, there's actually about 1/8 to 3/16 variance in even the length of these tiles to give it that look. And so that's what I was thinking. Across these, yeah, we'll end up with our 3/8. As you can see, we're getting close to finishing up, getting all the tile laid, and you will notice that I don't have a lot of spacer blocks in. And it's kind of what I ran into the last time I laid this style of tile. It's so inconsistent, it's difficult to use spacer blocks, because your spacer blocks end up start throwing you off. You almost have to eyeball your grout lines and just kind of reach a happy medium with them. If you are using true square tiles that are consistent, your grout lines are really important to really get a clean looking job. And then you can use your spacers, and that way you keep your grout lines completely uniform. But with this style brick, even if you can't get it consistent because they're not consistently shaped. Some are longer than others, and the edges aren't completely straight. So, difficult to do. This is probably one of the most difficult tiles I have laid. I've got my grout lines so they look pretty consistent, about as consistent as you can get with this tile. And now you have a minimum 24-hour cure time on your thin set before you can actually put any weight on it. Give it time to cure. once the dust here, then you can move on to grouting and finishing up the job. So moving on to the last process in this is grouting. We've already got everything set with the thin set. We'll let it cure for 48 hours, or depending on weather, sometimes you might have to let it cure a little longer than that or less. Just kind of whenever it's cured, you'll be able to know because the tile's pretty solid and not moving. So now we're on to grouting. Last time on this tile here, it's real porous. I tried to float it in, and I ended up, it was a real pain to get all the grout cleaned back off the stone because it's real porous tile. So this go around, I'm going to use a grout bag. This time around, I'm going to use a grout bag and try to just apply the grout right straight into the lines and then smooth it out as I go, and hopefully not get into the issue of having to clean the grout back out of the porous tile. Yeah, for this job here, I'm using a pre-mixed grout. For smaller jobs like this, it's just a time consuming to have to mix your own grout and get it right, or you can just buy it already pre-mixed for small jobs. Yeah, for this job here with these bricks, we're using a grout bag. You just put your grout in it, twist it up, and squeeze it out at the bottom. The ideal for this is what I'm doing is, as you can see, I'm trying to get it to where the grout is just laid kind of right in there and not too high. That way, as I'm floating the grout to get it smoothed out, it doesn't get up on the brick, because this is real porous and the grout just kind of sticks to it, and after it dries, it creates like a glaze that you have to buff off, and it's very difficult to get off of this tile. So I'm using this, and just run your grout right down the line like that, high enough that you can float it, but trying to keep most of it in the crack so you don't get it all over the face of the tile. And you want to do it kind of small sections, so that way you don't end up with trying to get it grouted too much before it starts setting up. Using a grout bag like this, the larger grout lines is a lot easier to do than a smaller one. It's kind of hard to use a grout bag if you're doing like 1/8 inch grout joints. But I'm doing anywhere from 1/4 inch to 3/8 on this one. Makes it pretty, works out pretty good. When you're using grout tool, you want to keep the face of it kind of moist. That way it won't grab the grout. It'll just kind of float it over. You just kind of try to work it right in the grout line, trying not to make too much of a mess. With this, kind of get some moisture in it so it won't grab whatever you're using. This is a grout, I don't know what you call it. It's a grout float. Okay. It's gum rubber is what it is, with a piece of felt. That way as you press down, you can see it kind of flexes to follow the contour of the grout, of the tile rather, because the grout's kind of soft with it. use a grout sponge, and as you're doing your grout sponge, it'll kind of fill in any of the voids that's in your grout line. And trick when you're using a grout sponge or any of this stuff, you want to keep it clean as you can. You just have to kind of gauge what pressure to use to get the grout lines to kind of fill in and get all the air voids out of them. And then after you get it, then just real light pressure with your sponge to try to get the face cleaned back off, so that you don't end up with a lot of this. As I was saying, it'll kind of glaze up after it dries on top of the tile, and you'll have to kind of polish it off. But the more you wipe it, the less glazing you'll end up with, and makes cleanup a lot better. Standard tile's real kind of a slick surface, and you can go a lot quicker, and you don't have to try to keep it as clean because it'll buff right off. But and there we have the finished product. Grout is complete. So we'll let the grout set, and once it cures up, then we can finish just polishing the haze and everything off the tile that we have. Then completed project. We'll get the wood stove set back on it.
Well, the hearth looks great once Bob finished the new carpeting. Although not a typical video from our Alaskan view, we hope you enjoy it. We want to show the Alaskan can-do spirit even when tackling a big DIY project. In the comments, let us know what home remodeling projects you are up to. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see our future projects. Thanks for watching. See you next time.